Hey everyone, Yarn here, and welcome to this week's Friday Makemup from I Just Want to Tell You a Story. This week, today's prompt was, it's the Ides of March, how could the course of the Roman Empire in human history have been changed if Julius Caesar had never been assassinated? We also took the comments from one of our favorite channels here, which is the Infographics channel. Their episode 50 Insane Facts About the Nazis. So we'll have a link to that in the description. The first comment comes from Robert Borgland 5783. He writes, "One evening I was in a heated argument with my ex-wife. Full-blooded German gal. Love her to death, but she looked at me all twisted and said, 'We make lampshades out of people like you.' I've never forgotten that 40 plus years ago." The second comment comes from Randall Besh 2424. Werewolves were the post-war terrorist cadres. However, with the death of Heydrich, they were poorly staffed in weapons and training. Otherwise, the Allies would have had trouble with them. So we took that prompt and those comments and came up with something that we're calling an alternate history of the families of the Roman Empire. I want to just take a second before we get started to say thank you to everyone that has subscribed so far. I really appreciate the support, and if you wouldn't mind taking a second to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, it really helps us out. So without further ado, here is an alternate history of the families of the Roman Empire from Friday Makemups on I Just Want to Tell You a Story. It was the eve of Darius Ran's 16th birthday, and his father had sent for him. Generally, whenever his father Draken brought him into the private study, it was because of some transgression or another that the locals were complaining about. But Darius was not sure what it could be this time. He's been cordial to his tutors and overall well-behaved for his station in life. He could only surmise it had to do with the next day's activities. Opening the heavy doors to the study, Darius saw his father sitting behind a bank of computer monitors. Draken motioned for Darius to close the door. The room was especially large and foreboding in a house that itself was on an estate that put most palaces to shame. It had been in the Ran family for hundreds of years. Rumors abound from their various neighbors and political rivals as to how they were able to afford such lavish things in a time when it seemed the empire suffered most. And yet they always had secrets. Secrecy leads to jealousy, envy. There seemed to be no shortage of powerful enemies that the Ran family counted amongst their long lineage. Some called them villains, some called them heroes, but those who knew them best called them murderers. The estate always seemed to have some kind of remodeling or construction in process. The house itself was at least 300 years old, but was constantly being updated with the latest advances in technology. Indoor plumbing, electricity, advances in home security were always first to be implemented. In this day and age of computers, AI, and digital society, still the house stood, a testament to the rock-solid foundation the family had been founded on, always evolving, always adapting. They lived in Eastern Europe, and as much as they tried to hide from the world out there, it seemed the intrusion of progress marched ever closer to their doorstep. Darius never fully understood his family's business, where they got their wealth, or what the expectations were for such a prestigious family within the Roman Empire for nearly 2,000 years now. He knew his father would leave for months at a time, and his mother had passed away before Darius could walk. So he had been essentially raised by maids, tutors, and trainers. He particularly enjoyed his arms training, but history and geography were torturous to him. It was a life of solitude, and Darius had really only made one friend in town. Even that was tenuous at best. His friend William didn't understand the ways of the Rokon family, and regularly teased him about his naivety of the world. While true, Darius had not experienced much beyond the walls of the palatial house, nor been beyond the borders of the town, Darius still knew much that William would never approve of. How to kill a man, a woman, various implements of war. This has been Darius's training since he was a toddler. Dangerous and more than a little entitled. Draken pulled himself away from his monitors and shut them down. A sign of something serious. The computers were rarely turned off. He stood up and walked to his son, motioning for him to sit. Draken asked Darian if he knew the story of the attempted assassination of Julius Caesar. Somewhat aware of the attempt, Darius nodded his head. Draken explained that was good, but Darius doesn't know the true story. Few people did. It was a day of reckoning for Brutus, his brother, and his family. A day that would change the world. It might not seem like it now. Looking back through history, we have the advantage of the long view. But it was a pivotal moment for the Empire, and by extension fueled the course of humanity from that day forward. Draken wove the tale as it had been told to him by his father and passed down from generation to generation. The true story of their family. Marcus Junius Brutus was born into a family of hunters. He and his brother Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus were some of the most prolific hunters of the period. It was a time of monsters, a time of fear and ignorance. The world was in darkness, and as civilizations pushed its boundaries further into that darkness, they found the darkness would push back. Werewolves, vampires, minotaurs, fairies, giants, harpies, it was all true. Humanity knew so little of the world they inhabited, but certain families were chosen, trained. They would be the sword to thrust into the belly of the denizens that would do them harm. The Brutus family was known throughout the empire for their wealth and influence, but very few people questioned why that was. Relative to their peers, they were a brutish lot that would openly wear their position of privilege on their sleeves. Any time the armies advanced, there was a Brutus ahead of them, looking not for human enemies of the empire, but for those things that lurked in the dark and the night with dripping fangs, ready to pounce. They were funded by the Caesars and the Senate. Quietly, they carried out campaigns of genocide against entire species. The other civilizations of the world had so many weaknesses compared to humans. Werewolves, silver, vampires, the daylight itself, fairies, iron. The Brutus family and so many others studied, trained, and would wage war in the name of humanity. Never thanked, but always rewarded. Marcus Brutus was a particular favorite of Julius Caesar. He knew the brutal lengths that Marcus would go to for the kill, and Julius reveled in it. Julius was never known for his subtlety or his temper. He and Marcus made a good team. Julius pointed and Brutus attacked. Marcus Brutus was so in love with what he did, he relished to such a degree of fanaticism that he didn't see the wolf in Emperor's clothing. The gold blinded him to the betrayal to come. Marcus was sent to Pompeii by Julius. There were rumors of some undead attacking the locals. Decimus was not able to join his brother, though. His wife was expecting their second child, and she made him swear to stay for the birth. That was fine with Marcus. It was for good reason. Sure enough, some warlock had raised the dead, and accidentally started a series of events that brought many more back. Unintentional, but massively destructive. Marcus met a few other hunters there. This was a large enough situation that many families were involved, and it took the magic of a witch from the Longinus family to finally put the threat down. There were many casualties, but the dead were living no more. However, while the prolonged hunt had Marcus and the others away from Rome for so long, Decimus got a message to his brother, not to come back. There was something afoot amongst the nobles, and Decimus was still investigating. For the time being, Marcus should hold and wait. Unfortunately for Marcus, this also meant keeping up appearances with the people of Pompeii. There was a time when Marcus despised these people, all of them. It was his own ignorance of youth. Marcus Brutus's father was killed in Pompeii. Never knowing the truth, he had always assumed it was an assassination. But in reality, it was a rogue djinn that had made its way to Pompeii. His father was a hero that died protecting the people, but never being able to have that heroism revealed for fear of the panic that would surely follow from the masses finding out that monsters are real, and among them. Marcus felt he had truly overstayed his welcome, so he offered his services to the ruling class. He found out in short order they were planning an uprising against Rome. As terrifying a prospect as that was, there was a deeper meaning behind the revolt. One of the loudest opponents to Julius was a man named Egan. He spoke of betrayals and misappropriations, corruption. Marcus confronted Egan, and he knew that at least some of it was bluster. So Marcus pressed him for more information, with the tact and civility that a Brutus knew. Soon, Egan revealed the true meaning behind the attempted civil war. Julius Caesar was a werewolf. Marcus scoffed at first. It was a ridiculous claim. He had known Caesar for years. He would have known. After some reflection, Marcus began to entertain the possibility. What if? He never noticed Julius using silver implements, but that wasn't enough. Marcus could have just missed it. Egan went on to tell him that Julius came from a long line of lichens. They had been ruling for some time, hiding their true nature. They had used Marcus, Decimus, and so many others to their own end. The sword of the empire was actually the sword of the enemy. They've been deceived, all of them. Still refusing to believe such a wild accusation, Marcus waited. He helped the armies of Pompeii prepare, waiting for word from his brother. Finally, Decimus wrote to Marcus. The situation was dire. Marcus had been gone nearly a year and was pining for home. He needed to tell Decimus. They would confront Julius Caesar together. Decimus, however, came to Pompeii. When Decimus arrived, Marcus had never seen his brother in such a state, wild-eyed and frantic. They sat together and exchanged information. Marcus relayed his story of Pompeii, and Decimus did not blink. His story was far more bitter, and unfortunately confirmed the story Marcus had heard in a far more tragic way. Decimus's wife gave birth to a lichen child. It tore through her at birth, and Decimus immediately killed it. With her dying breath, she told Decimus how Julius Caesar took her against her will, and the child was his. Devastated, Decimus spent the last period plotting his revenge. To kill Julius Caesar. Marcus needed no prompting. He was ready to expend his life to make sure that Julius Caesar never hurt another person. The Brutuses were hunters, and so were many other families. They couldn't have all been so blind for so long. Decimus was able to sway many members of the Senate that Julius Caesar needed to be removed from power, forcefully. His terror would not end until he was dead. Decimus needed Marcus's help to bring the fiend to an end. There was a Senate hearing coming up in a few days, March 15th. Caesar would be there, and the Brutus brothers would be as well. There would be many respected members of the Senate there that the Brutuses needed to execute their plan. A couple days passed. The brothers continued quietly rallying support until they were sure no one would raise a hand to stop them, or possibly even help them. What most of the other Senate members did not know was that silver weapons had to be used. Marcus and Decimus would be the ones to strike the fatal blow. The morning of reckoning came. The conspirators met again before the hearing. They laid out the plan. Every person had to play a part to get Julius Caesar away from his personal guards, alone and vulnerable. Walking into the Curia that day, there were only 3 men in the Senate not sweating nervously. Julius Caesar, unaware of the coming betrayal, and Marcus and Decimus Brutus. 2 brothers who had killed countless monsters of myth and legend. This would be the last day for the lichen, Julius Caesar. Each participant played their part. Soon, Julius was alone and walking into the trap laid for him. Marcus and Decimus stopped him, accused him. Julius denied everything, clear up until they brandished their silver daggers. Then Julius Caesar dropped all pretenses and howled as he rushed the brothers. There was a fierce but brief battle. While the brothers were prepared for battling against all kinds of wicked being, they usually had the element of surprise. Julius Caesar had the advantage here. He was fast, even for a lichen. Within seconds, Decimus was laying on the ground with his stomach completely eviscerated. Marcus fought on, but Julius was transforming before his eyes. He grew a longer snout, covered in a rough, thick fur with claws that could rend steel. It all happened so quickly the other senators had no opportunity to react. Marcus only survived this long from pure reflexes, muscle memory. Avoiding swipe after swipe, bite after bite, Julius Caesar had fully turned into a hulking man-beast with a ferocity unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Julius sunk his teeth into Marcus's shoulder and picked him off his feet. Marcus screamed in pain, and the lichen Caesar threw him into the marble pillar. Broken and bleeding, Marcus weakly tried to defend himself with the woefully inadequate silver dagger. He could see wisps of steam where he had managed to cut Julius, but it was nothing remotely fatal, a fly buzzing at best. The massive creature that stalked Marcus was no longer the man he knew, but the man he had always been, a werewolf, a plotting and devious mastermind that manipulated the hunters and their families for decades. Feelings of sorrow and shame filled Marcus Brutus. Seeing his brother dying in this place mere feet away, there was nothing he could do. His shoulder was torn and useless, and just a meager dagger held out before him, like a child with a wooden sword facing down a Roman phalanx. The Julius lichen bore down on Marcus, but did not finish him off as everyone anticipated. Instead, the monster growled in Marcus's ear. "We use people like you to feed our young ones. Unfortunately, your brother killed my last offspring, but you will feed so many more for generations to come. I may die one day, but I assure you, Marcus Brutus, your life will be nothing but pain and torment for all time." Draken finished the story and stood in front of his son. It was time. Tomorrow will be his 16th birthday and time for Darius to learn everything about their family. He walked to the gigantic bookcase and pressed a hidden button. A section of the case slid away to reveal a staircase behind it. Darius sat in silence. He actually knew much of the story, but had never heard of how things ended with Marcus and Decimus. He was only aware that the skirmish ended with Julius Caesar victorious. Draken asked his son to follow him as he descended down the staircase. There were lights framing the twisting stone steps. Along the way, the son asked question after question. Is that why he was trained? Why he was pushed and made ready? For a secret war that had been raging for millennia? Draken only said that all the answers he would need would be in the catacombs below their estate. On and on the staircase went. It felt like it had gone down for at least 3 or 4 stories when it finally opened up to a cavernous area of huge stone and steel. There were vehicles and weapon racks as far as Darius could see. Row after row of weapons, books of various ages, all full of arcane and lost knowledge. The subterranean base stretched out before the both of them, but Draken walked purposely. He'd known this area since he was a boy of Darius's age. This was where his father took him when he was initiated, and now it was his son's turn. So it had gone for hundreds of years in the Rokon family. They were one of many such families, but Draken knew they were by far the deadliest. No other family had the steely determination, made the sacrifices that their family did. No other family was as well regarded as theirs. Now, Darius was going to learn the true secret behind the family's success. Walking through a large bunker door, there was a room filled with equipment of all kinds, and a ways further down were the holding cells. Draken walked his son past many barred and empty ones, but occasionally Darius would spot something in the darkness. Something just in the corner of the cells, barely out of sight. There was some movement, but quick and light. It filled Darius with dread and curiosity at the same time. Would he be expected to fight these things? Perhaps it was the brashness of youth, the invincible attitude that is held by those that have never feared being vulnerable. Darius was becoming excited. All these years of solitude and combat training, tactics from bygone eras, he would finally be able to let loose and fight the things he had only read about. It was real. Before them loomed another door of solid steel. While the other cells had bars on them, this was something different. There was something powerful behind this door. Draken turned to his son. He told him to steel himself. Be prepared, because it doesn't get easier from here. Draken held his hand to a scanner. The device beeped green and released the latch holding the door closed. Draken pushed it open to reveal a stark concrete room. There were only 2 things in here. An impossibly old and emaciated man chained to the wall, and another figure under a covering on a chair. The old man looked up and acknowledged them both. He mentioned it was good to see Draken again, and this must be his heir. Darius's father smiled and turned to his son. This man you see before you is Marcus Brutus. He's been kept alive thanks to the lichen gift that Emperor Julius Caesar bestowed upon him 2,000 years ago. Now was Darius's turn. Draken handed Darius an ornate silver dagger and instructed him to cut Marcus and catch his blood with a ceremonial chalice that had been handed down generation to generation. Marcus squirmed and protested, cursing them and cursing the emperor. Darius was confused and stunned. He dutifully took the cup and dagger and did as he was asked. Marcus strained and pulled, his chains rattled as Darius cut his flesh. The blood flowed freely, and Darius caught as much as he could with the bound man thrashing around. Draken began a speech about honor and family. Long after Marcus and his brother Decimus cast aside the honor of being the sword for the Roman Empire, many more families took it up. The Rokan family was one of the first and longest surviving servants of the empire. Today would be Darius's entrance to this world, but there were still 2 tasks to complete. First was to drink the blood of Marcus Brutus. This would imbue Darius with the Lycan gift and give him the strength to smite their enemies. Darius obeyed his father. He lifted the chalice to his lips. The smell was not unfamiliar, but that made it no less revolting. Looking to his father, Darius tilted it back and swallowed every drop. The pungent taste filled his being. It threatened to return, but Darius was able to control the reflex. After several gulps, blood was gone. His father commended him. Now for the second task. Draken walked to the figure in the chair and removed the covering. To Darius's utter shock and amazement, it was his friend William from town. William glared up in spite and anger. His mouth was gagged. Draken ripped the gag from William's mouth. William spat and cursed. He was of Marcus Brutus's bloodline, and they swore they would never stop until the empire was free from the Lycan reign. Marcus cried out to spare William. He was just a child, a pawn in this never-ending and bitter war. Draken turned to Darius. He told him the only way he could move forward was to slay the enemies of the empire. They were tricksters, hucksters. They would do anything, even taking advantage of a young boy that's been destined for greatness. Without hesitation, Darius walked to his friend and quickly slashed across his throat. There was gurgling and spasms as William bled out across the floor of Marcus's cell. Draken turned to Marcus while speaking to his son Darius. We do what must be done, for the glory of the empire. Marcus can mourn the loss of his kin for as long as he needed. They would leave them together for as long as Draken felt necessary. Unmoved by the cruelty of his father, Darius watched as Marcus cursed them again and again. The father and son Rokan turned and left. Draken turned the lights off to the cell to leave the now solo prisoner to suffer in the darkness. The same darkness that Marcus once fought against, he was now being swallowed by. Darius turned to his father and simply asked, "When do we get started?" Well, there we go, a nice alternative history to what if Julius Caesar was a werewolf. Thought that would be an interesting one for everybody. So thank you for watching, and again, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to like, share, comment, subscribe, really appreciate those things. So along these lines, what would you have written with those prompts, with those comments? Always interested to see how other people interpret those things. Well, everyone, take care of yourselves. I've been Yarn with I Just Want to Tell You a Story, and we'll see you next Friday.